Just a second. Is the screen visible? Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
The screen is visible to you all? Okay. So we'll just revise our module 1 and module 2. So you know like what we have in our syllabus related to module 1. I hope I have just listed out the contents of module 1 here. So module 2 is also I have covered up. I didn't try to add on in the contents. So you know the syllabus, so we'll just brush out through it. So first of all, if they ask you to define what you mean by metrology exactly, you should be knowing it is nothing but a study of science of measurement. So in measurement, you will be having the two aspects, both metrology includes theoretical and the practical aspect of measurement. Okay, so you should be knowing what you mean by metrology. So what are the things you could measure in it? So it has both theoretical as well as the practical aspects in measurements. So they might have given a question, a statement to define metrology, and they might ask which is the right statement for definition of metrology. You should be able to click the right one, whether it includes the theoretical aspect and even the practical aspect of it or not in this way. And further, you know, measurement is a process of comparing quantitatively an unknown magnitude with a predefined standard. So always for measurement, you compare with some of the predefined standards. It could be primary, secondary, tertiary standard, whatever we are using. So you should be knowing the difference between the metrology as well as measurement. And for our technical engineering purpose, metrology is always restricted to measurements of length, angle, quantities which are expressed in our linear and angular measurements. Because we do restrict the measurement in two varieties. One is the linear measurements and other one is the angular measurements. You know which are the instruments which are being used to measure linear as well as angular measurements. So this is the overview about, you should be knowing what you mean by metrology, measurements, and which are the instruments being used to measure linear and angular. And other thing, some of the objectives of the metrology could be given. You should identify which are the right objectives. We have discussed a set of around 8 to 9 objectives which are main objectives of our metrology. So first and foremost thing is we have to provide an accuracy at the least cost. So this is the first agenda what we have studied, because it should be economical and it should be available in ease for the operators to inspect and get the accurate measurements. And next, evaluation of newly developed products and to ensure the components are within the specified dimension. The second main objective is to see that the parts which are being designed and manufactured lie within the range of dimensions, within the tolerance limit. So that is the second objective. And to determine what are the process capabilities. So this is the third objective of it. And fourth one, so these are all done to access the measuring instrument capabilities and ensure that they are advocate for the specific measurements. Means to assess the measuring capabilities, it should be always calibrated regularly so that you can get required measurements. And the other objective is you should reduce the cost in inspection as well as rejections and rework. So if you do all these objectives properly, so then the rejections and the rework will come down drastically. Along with that, the cost for the inspection, which is more, will be reduced if you use the concept of metrology. So this is one of the objectives. And next other objective is to standardize the measuring methods. The measuring methods what we follow should be same across the world. It's not like in India you use one standard measurement, and in other place they use another standard. So wherever you go, if you want to measure 6 centimeter, the 6 centimeter should be uniform and commonly used. And the 6 centimeter distance should not vary. So they should be having a standardized measuring technique. So that is one of the objectives. And next is to maintain the accuracy of measurements through periodical calibration of the instruments. That's what I told. Instrument capabilities also focus on a calibration part, how well it has been calibrated and how regularly it has been calibrated, so that you can get accurate measurements. And last is to prepare designs for gauges and special inspection fixtures, because gauges also plays a vital role in determining the dimensions as per the requirement. It can also be used as the standards for measurements. We have dealt with gauges, plain gauges, snap gauges, go gauge, no go gauge, everything, right? So based on that, proper designs have to be done. So these are all the set of goals or the objectives for metrology. And I can ask you, we have like fundamental methods of measurement which could be categorized into two ways. One is a direct comparison and other one is the indirect comparison. So what happens in direct comparison? So here we compare directly by using our primary or secondary standards. In indirect comparison, we do it by using some instrument which are being calibrated. So this is the difference. If you get the values directly by comparison with the standard available, it could be primary or secondary. Tertiary standard we don't use for direct comparison. Okay. So either of the two, directly comparing and getting the result is for direct. And then comes the indirect, in which you use an instrument to get the value which is being calibrated. Okay, so this is the difference between the two. And if any drawbacks, if they ask, which are being associated with direct comparison, so there are few. You cannot rely on this method always to see that it is very accurate and reliable, because it also depends upon the operator, which is a human being who sends the reading. So even some parallax error or any type of error can come into picture when a person is comparing the existing standard with that of the unknown. So you cannot always relay that it is accurate and reliable. And human senses are not equipped to make direct comparison of all the quantities with equal facilities all the time. Every time you cannot rely on human that he provides a perfect reading. So that is one. Second is, measurements by direct methods are not always possible, feasible and practical also, because it depends upon the variation in the temperature, measurement of weight. So it keeps on varying. It cannot be steady and consistent always when you measure. Sometimes the temperature get varied. Sometimes depending upon the person, how well he is measuring, the weight what he gets every time can vary. Even if you use a weight measuring instrument, if you stand on it and check your weight, sometimes it can show variation in the decimal point about your weight. It is if it is not calibrated properly, right? So all these comes into the drawbacks associated with direct comparison. So if they ask any question related to direct and indirect, we should be knowing what it is, what could be its disadvantages, if any. So in case of indirect, what we do, so most of the measurement system what we use are of indirect kind of thing. Okay, so please remember, because we use different measurements to determine our required values. So all these are basically indirect comparison what we are doing. So in this method, you will be having a chain of devices which is together called a measuring system. So you'll be having n number of devices to get one value. Yesterday in the practical, we dealt about the strain gauge measurement. To measure the value of the strain in the given material, how many components we had, right? So you'll be having a chain of devices to determine the unknown values in case of indirect comparison. For example, here you can consider to measure strain in a machine member. So where you have components such as strain, a component here will sense the strain. Another component transforms the sensed strain into the electrical quantity. So which is then processed suitably before being fed to a meter or a recorder. It is just telling the function of a transducer. So the transducer will sense the physical quantity here, which could be strain. So then it will be transformed into the required output signal, which will be our electrical quantity. So this is one example for our indirect comparison. So I've just listed out some of the difference between direct and indirect comparison. So you can go through it. What I've explained is been here. So you kindly go through it. Anyhow, I'll share this PPT for you all. And then you should be knowing the classification of measuring instruments. So as the standards, even the measuring instruments, you have three types. They are primary measurements, secondary measurements, and tertiary measurements. So what happens in primary measurements? Here it is compared directly with respect to the reference standards. In case of secondary measurements, it involves one translation, means the pressure will be converted into the displacement. In case of tertiary measurement, there will be two conversions. The speed will be converted into the required electrical signal required electrical signal by using electrical tachometer. So this electrical tachometer sends the speed and then it converts into the required output signal. So here this is a direct reference. What you need you will get directly by comparing. That is in primary. In secondary measurement, the input what you are using will be transmitted into the output with one conversion. But whereas in tertiary measurement, you will be having two conversions. Where to convert the speed into the electrical signal, you need an modifier device here, the second stage transducer, which converts the input signal into the required output using an tachometer. So these are about the different measurement systems which are available. So how many translation units? So all these steps you should be aware of. So this is not the classification of standards. Don't confuse classification of standards with classification of measuring instruments. And we were dealing like what do you mean by accuracy, what do you mean by precision. So they can give different statements and ask to identify which is the exact definition for accuracy or precision. You should be knowing the difference between two for this. So you know accuracy always provide the closed value to the quantity which is being measured. So what happens? It is the closeness with the true value. So you will be comparing with the true value with the actual. So actual value will be almost nearer to the true value. Then you can say how accurate the value is. So the accuracy of measurement means conformity to the truth. So that you are conforming with the standard with that of the actual. So standard will be nothing but in the form of conformity to the reality or the truth value for that particular part or product. And here accuracy can be improved by fine-tuning the calibration of the instrument. Accuracy can be improved, but that won't be possible in case of precision. Accuracy depends upon simple techniques of analysis. There is no complicated techniques associated with our accuracy. But what happens in case of precision? It is a measure of reproducibility of the measurement. So if you measure a reading of a particular part using that instrument once, and if you do the same thing for 5 times, it has to provide a same value. So it is just the repeatability of the reading what you are getting. So then you can tell how precise the reading is what you are obtaining. But the precision value what you get cannot be improved, but accuracy can be improved. Precision depends upon many factors and requires many sophisticated techniques in order to overcome if any errors is associated. But that is not the case in case of our accuracy. So you should be knowing both what you mean by accuracy and precision. And then let us throw some light on errors associated to our measurements. So how do you define the error? So error may be defined as a difference between the measured and our true value. So you know the difference. So what error you get, that will be the percentage of deviation you calculate, and show the deviations. So now coming to the classification, we have three types of classification in errors. These are systematic error, random, and illegitimate errors. So you should be knowing what you mean by three. So errors which are coming consistently in a measuring instrument, which are called to be as a systematic error. So every time you use that instrument to measure, the same sort of error is approaching. So then you call it as a systematic error. It might be due to the calibration might not have been done by a trained operator. So some deviation in the calibration. Due to this, every time you are getting some consistently error in the instrument. Second classification is about random errors. So we cannot predict based on our environmental variation some different type of error creep in when you measure using an instrument. So these could be termed to be as our random errors. And next is illegitimate errors. So these are the errors which could be caused accidentally by performing some mistakes or blunders while operating. So which is not done intentionally, but it happens all of a sudden. A mistake by a human being, because humans are born to make mistakes sometimes. So we cannot avoid. So these type of errors are called to be as illegitimate errors. So these are about its classifications. And then you should also know some, I'm just briefing out all the concept, not totally into the depth, which are minimum requirement for our quiz type of internals. So then you should be knowing about what you mean by standards. So we know a standard could be defined as something that is set up and established by an authority as a rule of measure of quantity, weight, extent, value, or quality. So for every measurement of quantity, weight, its value, or quality, you will be referring some standard which will be common throughout across the world. So this is nothing but the meaning of an standard. So in that we learnt about what you mean by standard of length also. So what happens here? Accurate measurements made by comparison with a standard is primary standard. So in standard of length, we basically use one particular standard, which is primary standard, to get the accurate measurement. So primary standard was derived by two countries across the world. We dealt about what you mean by imperial standard and international prototype standard. We brought the sketch and explained how does it look, which is the material used for it, what is being done, annealing to be done in order to improve its primary standards. We have two type of standards that you have to know: imperial and international prototype meter. So both are used to measure the accurate measurements for the length by comparing with either imperial or international. So this you should be knowing. And also, if they ask you the subdivision of the standards, we have four categories into it. So primary, secondary, tertiary, and the working standards, right? So primary standards are mainly used for inspection thing. Secondary standards are the primary and the secondary standards are used for very inspection purpose only. These are too costly and they are used once in a while, not regularly. And tertiary standards are used in the laboratories for comparison, and working standards are also being used in the workshops. So these two are used rarely to compare and to inspect whether the instrument is working properly after calibration, or it could be used during the time of calibration also. So these are the subdivision of the standards which are available. And then we had dealt about the end standards also. So what do you mean by end standards? So when the length being measured is expressed as a distance between two parallel faces, then it is called end standards. Okay. So if you want to measure any distance or the length between the two parallel faces only, it is not inclined faces or anything, it should be two parallel faces, then only you use the end standards. So N standards can be made to a very high degree of accuracy because we are using good hardened steel materials for slip gauges and the gap gauges. So these are the examples for our N standards. And we solved the problem on end bars. Calibration of the end bars problems we have dealt it, but for 1 marks you won't be giving. I won't be giving any problems related to the end bars. So I'm not discussing the problems exactly, or else at least I should focus on giving 2 to 3 marks on it because you have to draw the sketch finally how you are adding the end bars together to get the required measurements. So I'm just stopping it. But related to end standards, you should be knowing what you mean by it, which are the type of end standards being used, and then we have to focus on about our linear measurements. So which type of instruments we use to measure the linear measurements? In that, we are using slip gauges. So what are slip gauges basically? These slip gauges are rectangular blocks of steel which has a cross section of 30 mm face length and 10 mm face width. Okay, so I haven't shown any figure, I'm sorry. Okay, so slip gauges, if they ask you the dimension, you should be knowing exactly the cross section of it, how it is 30 mm face length and 10 mm face width. So slip gauges are the blocks of steel that have been hardened and stabilized by heat treatment. So if they ask you how it is being stabilized, so you should tell it is made up of steel material which is hardened and stabilized by our annealing or the heat treatment process. So they are ground and lapped to size to very high standards of accuracy and surface finish. The surface finish of the slip gauges will be very accurate. You have used these slip gauges, you have performed experiments, you know how good quality it will be and how accurate readings you can get. Okay, so a gauge block, which is also known as Johnson gauge or slip gauge or Joe block, is a precision length measuring standard consisting of a ground and lapped metal or ceramic block. So if they ask you to define what do you mean by gauge block, you should be knowing. And what is the other name for the gauge block? You should be knowing. It is also known as a Johnson gauge or a slip gauge or a Joe block, which is helpful in getting a precise length. Okay, so this information related to the slip gauge for our linear measurements, you should be aware enough. And what do you mean by bringing phenomenon associated with the slip gauge? So you know very well how you do the bringing phenomenon in slip gauges to embed all the slip gauges together to measure the required linear measurements. So usually we'll be having two slip gauges. First you'll keep it perpendicular, then you swap down and by rotating clockwise and anti-clockwise so that you have a proper adhesion between the two. So you will repeat the same process depending upon how many slip gauges you have to add on. Okay. So the other thing, you cannot keeping on adding on all the slip gauges. You should be having some constraints what we follow. So in order to achieve maximum accuracy, some precautions have to be taken. What are these precautions? Always try to use minimum number of slip gauges. Wipe the measuring faces clean. You clean the measuring faces fast using soft, clean leather. Okay, so then you can do the bringing part of it. Bring the individual blocks together. So what you do first, you will press it at right angles, then you slide and then you twist so that there will be no voids in between and you will be having a proper contact between the two surfaces of the slip gauge which has to be measured. So this is about the bringing phenomenon, what you should be knowing. And they can also ask you about the slip gauge sets. There are n number of slip gauges. So how many pieces are there in the slip gauges? You should be aware. You try to know the information about all the sets because that could be asked. Okay. So slip gauges are graded according to the accuracy. Okay, so under accuracy, you have three categories: the grade 0, grade 1, and grade 2. So grade 2 is intended for use in workshops when during actual production of the components, tools and gauges. So grade 2 are mainly used in the workshops while manufacturing the components, tools or the gauges. Where grade 1 slip gauges are used, it is used for higher accuracy for use in inspection departments. So grade 1 is basically used in our inspection departments, and grade 0 is used in laboratories and standard rooms for periodic calibration of grade 1 and grade 2 gauges. So for periodic calibration in the laboratories, you can use grade 0. So these are the three grades which are available in slip gauge sets. So these are the available gauges. I don't remember whether I started recording. So these are the available slip gauges. So what are the slip gauges sets available? So first one is M87 set of slip gauges. We have solved problem using all available sets, right? So in this you should be knowing in M87 set how many number of pieces are available. Okay, so if you remember, sometimes they could ask how many number of pieces are available in between these two. Then you should be able to know the range. So from 1.001 to 1.009, you have 9 pieces. Similarly, from this range, 1.01 to 1.49, you have 49 pieces. Likewise, for all the range, how many pieces are available in M87 set?
Ma'am,
So,
will we have numericals based on this?
yeah.
Will we have numericals based on
No,
this?
based on this, if you get only 1 marks thing, so they might ask you to identify the IT7s. I'll tell you which type of things you can get. I'm just coming in the flow. Please kindly wait.
Okay, ma'am.
So at least minimum you should be knowing the number of pieces which are being available in each set. Okay. Because numerical, if I give at least minimum 2 to 3 marks, I have to give for every problem. So which is not currently advisable. They say it should be only 1 mark. So some of the things you
Okay,
should
ma'am.
be able. Okay, suppose if they ask you, this kind of problems could be asked. If they ask you to build 49.3825 mm using M87 set, if it is being asked, and the combination of slips could be given in different ways. So you should be able to select which is the right combination of slips. So which is capable of giving for 1 mark. So that kind of problems could be given, not more than that. Okay. But for
Okay, ma'am.
those, we won't be able to fetch you the table in the Google platform, Moodle platform. So you should be able to know if I tell M1112 set of slip gauges, which are the ranges available. Okay. So there is no option to give us the images in the Moodle platform. That is one drawback what I'm thinking for to set the questions, but very simple questions only based on numericals you do get, which is equal to 1 mark. So only which is able to come, that's all I'm just showing you in the slides here. So other important notes on building of slip gauges. What are the important notes you have to follow? We have explained in the class already. You should always start with the last decimal place. Then you should take the subsequent decimal places to identify the required set. Then minimum number of slip gauges should be used by selecting the largest possible block in each step. So if in case protractor slips are used, first deduct the thickness from the required dimension, then proceed as per above order. So protractor strips we are not currently using, but these are the important note what you have to follow while you provide the combination of slips using the slip gauge sets which are available. Yeah, this is done. And these are the available two sets for solving the problems. And then You should be knowing some factors related to our angular measurements. We know that we used sine bars, sine centers, vernier bevel protractor, and angle gauges, right, in our laboratories as well as in solving the problems for angular measurements. So you should be knowing the constraints until where each instrument could measure the angles. So you know that sine bar could be used up to 45-degree angular measurements. So you can measure unknown angles of heavy and small components also. So if you should be knowing how a small component is placed. Small component is always placed above the sine bar, wherein heavy component it is placed below the sine bar, right? So that you should be knowing. So what do you mean by sine centers? Sine bars are similar to sine centers. Only thing is it will provide some centers so that you can, it helps you in measuring the conical pieces, right? So that is the advantage over the sine bar. So you'll be having centers extra on the sine bar where you can clamp the given piece. So it could be a tapered one, it could be a conical one, whatever. It helps you to give the measurements. And here sine centers are capable of measuring up to 60 degree. And then we worked about on vernier bevel protractor, which is capable of measuring about until 360 degree. So then angle gauges. Who invented this angle gauge and in which year? So that you should be aware of. And in angle gauges, there are some sets of pieces. So how many pieces you do have? So you have basically 13 pieces. So these are divided into three categories. What are those? Degrees, minutes, and seconds. And we have a set for angle gauge. So we have used this table to solve the problem, right? So we have degrees, minutes, and fraction of minutes. You can either use fraction of minutes or seconds, but we have solved the problems using degrees, minutes, and seconds. Okay, so these are the concepts you should be aware enough. And if a problem is asked for 1 marks, you can solve it by knowing the table. So for time being, it's better if you little bit try to memorize 2 to 3 tables related to slip gauge and the angle gauge. One simple problem for 1 marks, it could be asked. So then you should be knowing about autocollimator. Here we won't be asking you the entire description, procedure, how it operates, all those things, draw a sketch. No, nothing related to that part will be asked. But you should be knowing what you mean by autocollimator. So what are its purpose, why it is being used in that way. So this is basically an optical instrument which is used for measurement of smaller angular differences. So you should be knowing the basic things related to it. For smaller angular measurements, autocollimator usually provide a very sensitive and accurate approach. So that you should be knowing. So autocollimator is essentially an infinity telescope and a collimator combined with one instrument. So in autocollimator, you have two parts. One is the telescope part, another one is the collimator part. So combination of these two will provide you the autocollimator. So autocollimator is also used for testing of straightness. So all these concepts related to autocollimator you should be aware enough. So this is just a throw on light about our module 1, which is feasible for an objective type of internals. I haven't thrown anything in depth description, just an outer view of what all the parameters in module 1 deals with for an objective type. So next is associated to module 2, which speaks about limits, fits, and tolerance. So they can give you some abrupt statement and ask you which is the right definition for limit. You should not confuse at that time with the tolerance. Please provide an accurate, neat information and select a proper one. So limit, the maximum and the minimum permissible size within which the actual size of a component lies is called as an limit. So it is the maximum permissible size and the minimum permissible size within which a part could be accepted. So that is the criteria for our limits. Then you should be knowing what you mean by a tolerance. It is impossible to make anything to exact size. Everyone knows that there will be some variations. Therefore, some tolerance zone will be provided to overcome that permissible variation. So these are nothing but called our tolerance. So which will be providing the upper tolerance limit and the lower tolerance limit for the given dimension of the shaft here as shown. So this is the definition and the concept for our limits and tolerance. So then you should be knowing what you mean by unilateral, what you mean by bilateral tolerances. So what exactly happens in case of unilateral tolerance? So when the two limit dimensions are only on one side of the nominal size, then you call that to be as an unilateral tolerance, right? So you can see here. So this is a basic size, and the lower limit and the upper limit is lying on the one. Nominal is lying on one side of the nominal size. It is not lying on the opposite sides of the nominal size, because for every design you will be having a zero line, so you'll be having the deviations above the zero line and below the zero line also. But if you have all the limits variations only on the one side, or either towards the top or either towards the bottom, then you call that to be as an unilateral tolerance. So here this is the basic size, and both the upper limit and lower limit are lying on one side, and here also it is lying on the one side. It is towards the upper part, it is towards the So in each case, you know how to determine the tolerance values. So if you can write the basic size will be always the actual size, and the upper limit which has been given and the lower limit which has been given. So if you subtract these two, you will get the tolerance limit for that particular given part. Similarly, in bilateral tolerance, if this is the zero line, you will be having the limit dimensions can be either above or below. So zero line always refers with our basic line of the given part. So here what happens, you can see in bilateral tolerance, you have the tolerance upper limit and lower limit towards above the zero line and below the zero line also. But in case of unilateral, you will be having both the tolerance above the zero line. So these are the example for unilateral. Even these are the example of unilateral. Okay, so both can be above the zero line or it could be below the zero line. So if they ask you the difference and definition for unilateral and bilateral, you should be knowing to define what it is. Then you should be knowing some terminologies. It could be asked. So what do you mean by limits of size, nominal size, basic size, deviation? So all these we have dealt. Just brush up again. So limit of size, the two extreme permissible size of a component between which the actual size should lie, including the maximum and minimum size of the component. So this is nothing but our limit of size. The upper permissible size and the lower permissible size will provide us the limit of size. And then nominal size. Nominal size is the size of the component by which it is referred to as a matter of convenience. So based on the convenience, the nominal size will be associated. But you have a difference between nominal size and a basic size. What do you mean by basic size? It is the size of a part in relation to which all limits of variations are determined. So limits of variations are not determined with respect to the nominal size. It is the size, the comfort zone within which the dimension has to be. So based on convenience. But we are designing the variation in the limits based on the basic size. So you should be knowing the difference between the basic and the nominal size, and you should be knowing what you mean by zero line. It is the line with respect to which the position of the tolerance zones are always shown. And what do you mean by deviation? It is the algebraic difference between a limit of size and the corresponding basic size. So the difference what you get between the limit of size and corresponding basic size will be our deviation. And you know what you mean by upper deviation and lower deviation. So it is the algebraic difference between the maximum limit of the size and corresponding basic size. For lower, it will be the reverse. It will be the difference between minimum size, minimum limit of size and corresponding basic size. And always if they ask you the notation, please remember upper deviation is denoted by the letter ES. Lower deviation is denoted by the letters EI for hole. And if it is for the shaft, always we represent the same with the small letters. So you have to rewrite it as ES and EI in small alphabets. Apart from that, you should be knowing what you mean by fundamental deviation. So it is a deviation either upper or lower, which is nearest to the zero line. Sometimes the upper deviation might be nearer to zero line. So that we will consider as a fundamental deviation. Sometimes the lower deviation might be nearer to the zero line. So that will be considered as the fundamental deviation. So it could be either for an hole or an shaft. So it fixes the position of the tolerance zone in relation to the zero line. So then you should know what you mean by allowance. So it is the intentional difference between the hole dimension and the shaft dimension. Irrespective of any type of fit, always we do provide the allowance factor. So allowance factor will always provide some variation, some gap between the hole and the shaft dimensions. So then you should be knowing what you mean by fit, hole and shaft in common definition. So fit is an assembly condition between the given hole and the shaft. Okay, so if you have a proper assembly between hole and shaft, you can say that it is a good fit assembly. Then what do you mean by hole? It is a feature engulfing and component. So you have a feature which engulfs within a component. It has been encircled within a component. Then you call that as a hole. Then a shaft. It's a feature being engulfed by a component. So you have a shaft which has been surrounded by one component. Right? Similarly, you should be knowing the difference between hole and a shaft. No diagrams will be asked. I'm just for your purpose of understanding, it is being included over here. So you should be knowing three parameters related to fit, hole and shaft. And then you should be knowing what you mean by clearance fit. You should be knowing the difference between all the three: clearance, interference and the transition. So what happens in clearance fit? You will be having a hole and then shaft fit for the assembly. So what happens? In this type of fit, the largest permitted shaft diameter. So this is the shaft and this is the largest permissible diameter of the shaft. And this is the lowest permissible diameter of the shaft. So here you can see the largest permissible diameter of the shaft is lower than the lowest permissible this one diameter of the hole. So you have an clearance fit in this because you have the maximum clearance over here. So tolerance zone will never meet. So you'll be having the maximum clearance which provides the upper limit of the hole. So this is the upper limit of the hole and the lower limit of the shaft. So this is the lower limit of the shaft and this is the upper limit of the hole. So this provide us the maximum clearance. And in case of minimum clearance, it is a difference between this is the lower limit and this is the upper limit. So the lower limit of the hole to that of the upper limit of the shaft will provide us the minimum clearance. So when you need a minimum clearance, you can go with this. When a maximum clearance is being given, you can go with this. So always you will see for the meaning in the clearance fit, the upper limit of the shaft will be smaller than that of the lower limit of the hole. So that you should be knowing for the meaning of clearance fit and how do you show the maximum and the minimum clearance value. Similarly, you will be having an interference fit. So what happens in case of interference fit? The minimum permitted diameter of the shaft, this is the minimum permitted, the lower one. The minimum permitted diameter of the shaft will be always larger than the maximum allowable diameter of the hole. So this is the lower permissible dimension and this is the upper permissible dimension for the hole. So it is larger than the upper permissible dimension for the hole. In previous thing it was smaller and here it is larger. So that is the difference between the clearance and the interference. So again, how do you calculate the maximum interference and the minimum interference? So maximum interference will be given by the lower limit. So this is the lower limit of the hole to that of the upper limit of the shaft. So this entire thing will provide us the maximum interference. So for the minimum interference, you take the difference between this line is the upper limit of the hole to that of the lower limit of the shaft. So this will provide us the minimum interference fit. And then you should be knowing the last type, which is the transition fit. So what happens in case of transition fit? So here the diameter of the largest, so which is this is the hole and this is the shaft. So the diameter of the largest allowable hole is greater than the diameter of the smallest shaft. So this is the smaller permissible diameter of the shaft and this is the largest permissible diameter of the hole. So this largest permissible diameter of the hole will be larger than that of the smallest permissible diameter of the shaft. So this will provide maximum clearance. In transition, you'll be having the combination of the clearance and the interference fit. So then you should know how a maximum interference fit will be given. So maximum interference fit will be given with the lowest permissible limit of the hole to that of the upper limit of the shaft. So this distance, so the lowest permissible limit of the hole to that of the upper permissible limit of the shaft. So this will provide you the maximum interference fit. So based on the requirement whether you need a combination of the clearance and interference fit or only the clearance or only the interference, based on that the required fit assembly between the hole and the shaft will be obtained. And they can ask you what do you mean by interchangeability. You should be able to define it. So interchangeability occurs when one part in an assembly can be substituted for a similar part which have been made to the same part drawing. So there will be some companies who will be manufacturing similar amount of parts and the design will be the same. So based on the same design, the parts will be manufactured by different people. So if those parts are able to be that to be as that, options. One is universal interchangeability and local interchangeability. So what is the difference between two? So in case of universal, the parts to be assembled are from two different manufacturing sources. So you can take the parts from any other company who are manufacturing. So this could be within the country or outside the country. And in case of local interchangeability, all the parts which are being used are being manufactured by the same manufacturer. So that is the difference between the local and a universal interchangeability. Then you should be knowing something about the geometrical tolerances. So in geometrical tolerances, it is even some geometrical features other than linear and angular, such as straightness, flatness, roundness, etc., other than linear. And hence, in that cases, we always prefer geometrical tolerances. So, how do you define a geometrical tolerance? It could be defined as the maximum possible variation of form or position of a form or position of a feature. So, this is a definition for geometrical tolerance. So which will provide the maximum possible variation. It could be with respect to the form or position of the form or a feature of the given form. So based on the definition, we have three categories. We should be knowing which one is used for which purpose. Here we are not showing any diagram for geometrical tolerance and to identify what are we are measuring. At least you should be knowing out which are being used for which type of measurements. So in form tolerance, always it tells the form how it is, whether it is straight, flatness, roundness, or cylindricity. So these are the measurements done in case of form tolerances. Second category is our orientation tolerance. So these tolerances are used in order to measure perpendicularity, yeah, how parallel it is, yeah, the angularity part of it. So based on the requirement, orientation tolerances will be used. So apart from this, we will measure even the position. So it was told here, the form, orientation and the position are the forms which has been measured in geometrical tolerance. So in case of position tolerance, it can able to measure the position, how symmetric it is. Yeah, if it is concentric, so you will evaluate the concentricity of it or show how symmetric it is, or to evaluate its position. So these are the different categories available in our geometric tolerances. And they won't ask you the image, but at least you should be knowing like how it is being aligned. So always we use capital letters A to G for oversized hole, and letters P to ZC for undersized holes, and holes are always designated by capital letters. These factors you should be knowing. So which are the ranges which has been used for oversized holes, you should be knowing. Which are the ranges of letters used for undersized holes, you should be knowing. And you should be knowing holes are designated by capital letters. Similarly, the shafts are always designated by small letters. For oversized shafts, this is the range which is being used, M to ZC, and for undersized shafts, these are the range used, A to G. So this you should be knowing. And then some terminologies related to the shaft and the hole design. So what do you mean by each terminologies? You should be knowing. So what do you mean by basic shaft? So it is a shaft whose upper deviation will be always 0. That is, the maximum limit of the shaft coincides with the nominal size. Here means it will be coinciding with the 0 line, so that you won't be having the upper deviation. For basic shaft, we also, example, you represent it by small h for basic shaft. Okay, similarly for basic hole, it is the hole whose lower deviation is 0. Okay, so then it means the minimum limit of the hole coincides here with the nominal size, whereas here the maximum limit of the shaft coincides with the nominal size, which is called as our 0 line. Okay, so here it will be represented by capital H. Well, then what do you mean by hole basis? In the system, the basic diameter of the hole will remain constant, while the shaft size keeps on varying as per the type of fit needed. So means if you might need an interference fit, you might need an clearance fit, you might need the third fit. So based on the requirement of the fit, the variation in the diameter of the shaft will be done, but the basic diameter of the hole remains the fit remains the same. So based on the fit, either clearance, interference, or transition fit, the what we say the size of the shaft will be varied. So these are the terminologies you should be aware enough. And also what do you mean by hole basis and the shaft basis system, you should be knowing. Don't worry, the diagram won't be asked by to draw, but you should be knowing the concept. So in the hole basis system, there will be a reduction in the production cost usually. Why? And it is most commonly used because we need only one tool to produce the hole and the shaft, and it can be easily machined to any desired size, and hence the hole basis system is preferred over the shaft basis system. If they ask you why hole basis system is more preferable than shaft basis, you should be able to tell here. Here only one tool is required to both the hole and the shaft, and it could be easily machined to any required sizes, and hence it is economical and it is preferred than that of the shaft basis system, because it can fit to any transition fit which has been needed, because you are maintaining the basic size of the hole constant, and any variation with respect to the shaft dimension could be varied based on the fit you need. So hence hole basis system is always feasible and advisable. And then shaft basis system. So what happens in case of shaft basis system? Here the basic diameter of the shaft is kept constant, while the hole size is varied according to the type of the fit is required. So this is exactly the reverse of the hole basis system. However, it may be necessary to use the shaft basis system where different fits are required along a long shaft. Sometimes you need a long shaft in which the different fits are embedded. In that cases, it is preferable to go with the shaft basis system. For example, if in case of driving shafts where a single shaft have to accommodate various type of accessories such as coupling, bearing, collars, etc. all to a single shaft, then there will be a need for a long shaft basis. In that case, it is necessary to constrain the diameter of the shaft to be constant, and then you vary the hole size as per the accessories which has to be embedded. It could be the coupling, bearing, collar, etc. whatever. So this is the difference between the hole and the shaft basis system. Okay, so you'll be having a basic size of the shaft in which different variations are embedded as per the hole and the shaft basis system required. And you should be knowing the grades of tolerance, how many pieces are there, which are the ranges, all those things you should be knowing. So what do you mean by a grade? A grade is a measure of the magnitude of the tolerance. It helps in measuring the magnitude of the tolerance. You should be knowing this. So lower the grade, the finer the tolerance. This also you should be aware of. And then how many grades are available? There are total 18 grades which are which are allocated with the numbers IT01, IT0, IT1. Okay, then IT2 to you have IT16 continuously. Okay, so these are the fundamental deviations which are associated with the tolerance grade. 7i. If they ask you for IT5, what is the fundamental deviation? So then you have to show it is 7i. You should be knowing. Specifically, it could be asked for IT11, what is the value? You have for IT16. You should be aware about this entire table with respect to the grades of tolerance. And also, you can see that from IT6, every fifth step is 10 times the respective grade, right? So IT11 is equal to 10 into IT6. So from IT5, not from IT5, from IT6. From IT6 onwards, every fifth step is 10 times the respective. So for IT6, you leave 5 every fifth step. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So it is 10 times. So here IT11 is 100 and IT6 is 10. So 10 into 10 times gives you the value of IT11. If you are not able to memorize the value, you can redraw it based on this concept also. So if you know the value of IT5 as 7i, IT6 as 10i, remaining thing you can replicate. So for if you count 5 times here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you can guess the value of IT11. So 10 into 10 will provide you 100. Okay, so similarly, IT7 is 16. Again, make a 5 count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it is 10 times. 16 into 10, you will get 160. Similarly, IT8 is 25. You go with 5 steps. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So IT13 is 10 times that of IT8. 25 into 10 is showing you 250i. So in this way also you can guess to graph the table and know the values. And you should be knowing more 3 to 4 slides are there. And you should be knowing about different gauges, right? So why gauges are used? Gauges are used for inspecting. So gauges are the inspection tools which serve to check the dimensions of the manufactured parts. So these are the tools which are used to check the dimensions of the parts which is being manufactured. So we have some classification in the gauges. What are those? Standard gauge, limit gauges, workshop gauges, inspection gauges, and master gauges. So where standard gauges are used? Standard gauges are made to the nominal size of the part to be measured. So you will be having some parts whose measurement has to be checked. So based on the nominal size of the part, not with respect to the basic size, based on the nominal size, the convenient dimension for a part. So based on that nominal size, the standard gauge will be made in order to compare and check the measurement. Similarly, we have limit gauges, which are nothing but the go and the no-go gauge. which helps to check the range of the limit, whether it is falling within the required limit. So this could be identified by our limit gauges. So these are go and no go gauges are our limit gauges. So it is designed to check whether the actual dimensions of the work are within the specified limits or not. So these gauges helps in identifying whether the part manufactured is acceptable or rejected. So if it lies within the limit, while inspecting with go and no go gauge, then you can decide the part is acceptable. So while measuring using go and no go gauge, if it is been identifiable, it cannot be accepted, so then that part will be rejected. So this is about our limit gauges. Then you should be knowing about the work gauges. So these gauges to gauge the work as it is made. So work gauges are used in order to gauge once the work is being made. So these are the workshop gauges, which are usually used in workshops basically. So once the parts are designed and manufactured, so these gauges will be used to compare and check whether the part is as per the required dimension. Then we have inspection gauges. So it is used to inspect the finished parts. And finally, we have master gauges. So these are used to check size or condition of the other gauges. So you're not comparing it with the parts here. So you're comparing or checking the size of the other gauges by using the master gauges. So these are the available classifications. Then you should be knowing some concept related to Taylor's principle, not in depth exactly, at least a few concepts related to. So according to Taylor, go and no-go gauges should be designed always to check the maximum and the minimum material limits. Okay, so how do you measure the maximum and minimum material limits? So you have go limit and you have no go limit. So in case of go limit, this designation is applied to the limit of the two limits of the size which corresponds to the maximum material limit consideration. Goal limit always corresponds to the maximum material limit consideration. So that is nothing but our upper limit of a shaft and lower limit of an hole. So if you take the difference between upper limit of a shaft and lower limit of a hole, you get the maximum material limit condition. So that is being always checked by using our goal limit as per our Taylor's principle. And then you should be knowing about the no-go limit. So this designation is always applied to the limit of the two limits of size which corresponds to the minimum material condition. Go will always go with maximum material condition. No go will go always with minimum material condition. So that is the difference, the lower limit of the shaft and the upper limit of the hole. Just the opposite to that of go limit is our no go limit definition. So this you should be aware enough. And then you should be knowing the range we use, the percentage factor we use in identifying the gauge tolerance and wear tolerance while we design the gauge design. So what factors we use? The tolerance on the go and no gauges is usually 10% of the work tolerance. So that you should be knowing. Similarly, the wear tolerance is taken as 10 percentage of the gauge tolerance and is allowed between the tolerance zone of the gauge and maximum material condition only. Okay, so the range here is a tolerance range of the gauge and maximum material condition, not minimum material condition. So that is, if it, once it is told maximum material condition, you should be knowing it is a difference between the lower limit of the hole and the upper limit of the shaft. Okay, so these are the few concepts. I am not giving you the problem on gauge design or hole and the shaft design, but at least the concept related to that, terminologies and the ranges you should be aware enough. And then you should be knowing something about the comparators. We have different classifications, diagrams, explanation, how it operates, the advantages, the drawbacks, many things. which could not be currently asked in objective type. So at least a brief information about it you should be knowing. Okay, why comparators are used? They are employed to find out how much the dimension of the given component differ from that of a known datum. For this purpose, we are using an comparator, which actually works like an standard. You are referring something with a standard to know the unknown value. So it is also, as the name suggests, you are using it as a comparator. So we have different type of classifications what we dealt up. I hope we have done this through our online classes only. So, and you have specific PPTs also for this, which I have shared with you. So now comparing to the classifications, we have different classifications, which are mechanical comparator, optical, pneumatic, electrical, electronic, and combined comparator. So these all classifications we have dealt about. So you should be knowing at least it works by which means. Mechanical comparators works on gates, pinion, linkage, lever, springs, etc. How the optical comparator works. It works by using lens, mirrors, light source, etc. Similarly, you should be knowing how a pneumatic comparator works. It works by using high pressure air, valves, back and back pressure. Similarly, electrical comparator works by what all? It works by using the setup, step down transformers. Similarly, electronic comparator works by using amplifier and digital signal. Similarly, the combined comparator. The combination of any two of the above types can give you the best result. So you combine any of the two type of comparators which will yield you an best result. Again, combining two comparators depend upon what is your end requirement. So based on the application or the requirement, you will be able to combine two comparators together out of all six which has been mentioned. Sorry, all five which has been mentioned. So that will be termed to be as our combined comparators. And you should be knowing some characteristics of a good comparator. So what are the characteristics? It should be compact, it should be easy to handle, it should give a quick response or a quick result. It should not be delayed, waiting for a longer time to get the result. And also it should be very reliable. So how many times you use, we should say the equipment is very reliable. We can run the comparator with least maintenance. So every time until the longevity of the comparator is good, it provides a good value only if it is reliable when it is being used. Okay, not in stationary. While using it should be very reliable. Then there should be no effects of environment on the comparator. So the external environment factor should not provide any impact on the comparator when you are operating. So this is also one of the good characteristics. And also the weight of the comparator should be less. It should not be very huge. Also it should be cheaper, not very costlier. There are few others. It must be easily available in the market. It should be sensitive as per the requirement so that it can sense and provide the required measurement. And the design here should be robust in nature. Okay, robust design of the comparators are preferable because if any variation comes into picture without removing or without modification of the input variables, you should be able to get the required output. So then only you call that to be as a robust design. Then it should be linear in scale so that it is easy to read and get uniform response. So the measurement what we use here should be of a linear mode. And then it should have less maintenance. I told you it will be of less maintenance in nature. And then it should have hard contact point with long life. So if it is very reliable, always reliable will be proportional to the maintenance. If it is very reliable, then it is told that it has less maintenance so that you will get good amount of values which are accurate and precise. And it should have hard contact point with long life. So longevity of the comparators will be high when it is reliable for a longer time. So these are the few characteristics of the comparator. So I have just overviewed all the syllabus related to module 1 and module 2 associated with only objective type of questions. So no more in-depth description has been given. So you can go through this slide for your quiz. Along with that, please refer the material also which is being shared in order to know still more information about it. So now if you have any doubts, you are kindly available, you are able to discuss. Hello?
No, no doubt.
No doubts.
Okay, so please prepare
Can you
well,
share
all
this
the
PDF
best,
in
go
the
through the
official
slides, the
group?
material, everything is available. Which one?
This
The
PDF
PPT?
means today's class, yeah.
Yeah, today's class PPT I will share, and I will share you the recording of it also. You can have a look of it. Okay?
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So everyone, please write your name and USN number in the chat room if you haven't done. So then take care, bye bye. Anyone else, if you haven't written your USN, kindly do add on. I will just wait.